Dominic. Good evening, everyone. We've just called this meeting of the Sacramento City Unified Board of Education to order. This is a special town hall, not a regular board meeting. And so it will be a bit different than board meeting format that you might have experienced in the past. We're really looking forward to being able to take the questions that have been compiled from families and community members across the district as we discuss our Return Together distance learning plan. To kick off the meeting, I want to remind everyone that this meeting of the Sacramento City Unified Board of Education is being recorded in its entirety, and that the meeting will be webcast on our website at www.scusd.edu. That's www.scusd.edu. Superintendent Aguilar?
Thank you, President Ryan. And I too just want to welcome everyone to this virtual town hall. I know that this is a new space for all of us. And I appreciate everyone making time to participate in this. For all of us, certainly these last few months have been an emotional roller coaster as things change almost every day and several times on a daily basis. This health crisis obviously makes things very difficult to cope with. And there are so many uncertainties and anxieties that we're all feeling for ourselves, about our families, our loved ones, our community, and of course, our students and our staff as well. We're a few weeks away from September 3rd, which is the beginning of our 2021 academic school year. We will be opening fully in distance learning, and we understand that there are many, many questions that our families, our community members have about what school will look like and what will be different about this year as opposed to other years. I also want to make sure that we talk about this evening the importance of this opportunity for you to hear from us, as well as other experts about where we are in this crisis, guidance from our public health officials, more information about our distance learning plan. And what our community will hear from us about was informed by over 100 questions that we received from our community, as well as listening sessions that we've conducted with community members. Our students certainly had the opportunity to be in space to express their anxieties and their needs. Our CAC, our LCAP PAC, our African American Advisory Board, our DLAC board, other listening sessions that some of you have also hosted and that I've had the honor of participating in. I do see and want to thank our guests today, including Dr. Olivia Casirier from Sacramento County Public Health, who will talk to us about the current public health environment. Liz Guillen, a colleague from Public Advocates, who's going to talk to us about state requirements for distance learning. Our Chief Academic Officer, Christine Beda, many of our staff members who are also working tirelessly and relentlessly to make sure that we serve the academic, social, and emotional and other needs of our students. And of course, our students. We have 4 of our students helping us with questions for the event: Dominique Brooks, Sarah Frage from JFK, Natalie Nielsen from Rosemont High School, Abby Moriaka from West Campus. And also joining us, as hopefully you can see on your screen, are each of our board members. And I want to say thank you to our board members for making time this evening to participate. And lastly, as I mentioned, many of our staff members who are here from student support and health services, risk management, facilities, social and emotional learning. Thank you as well for making time. And lastly, President Ryan, I just want to say that we made the difficult decision to close our schools several months ago. It was a heartbreaking decision. We know that our schools, for many of our students, are the only safe haven. We know that many of our students depend on the support they receive from our schools, and that they can't continue to suffer the loss of learning. My own children attend Sac City schools. We're feeling the same level of anxiety under these uncertain times as every one of our community members are as well. We're committed to providing a distance learning plan that will include high quality structures, measuring student progress, instruction, accountability. To me as your superintendent, I know that our board shares that as well, that we meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of our students. And as I've heard from many, many of our community members, we have to focus squarely on closing the variation in quality of distance learning that we saw in the spring, and that I know everybody is expecting as we enter this new academic school year. We owe it to our students and to our families to continue planning for a safe reopening. Eventually, we'll hear from Dr. Kasiriye on that. But I know that we can all agree that our students can't afford any additional learning loss anymore. And that's what we're going to continue to focus all of our attention on. So, again, thank you for your support, all of our community members, for the grace, the flexibility. But today, I want to make sure that you hear responses to many of the questions that you had. And I know that we may not get to every one of the questions. We're committed to trying to provide answers through our webpage. So with that, let's get started. Thank you again, President Ryan.
Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar. We have a few housekeeping items for the town hall that will be presented this evening by our communications chief, Tara Gallegos. Tara?
Hi, everyone. So as we are moving through this webinar, I just wanted to give you a little direction about how you can properly attend as an attendee. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you can see that there are a few different options, one of which is a Q&A feature. So we, as Superintendent Aguilar mentioned, we did receive quite a few questions already, and so we will be responding to many of those, but we also hope to offer many questions on our website after the event. So please continue to submit Q&A through the Q&A feature. Please check back on our website for additional answers. You can also see at the bottom of the screen an interpretation feature. So we'll be offering 4 different languages for this event tonight: Spanish, Hmong, Chinese, and Vietnamese. One thing you'll notice is at the bottom of the screen, when you try and select interpretation, it does not offer Hmong and Vietnamese. That is just something that Zoom unfortunately does not offer at this time. So if you are looking for those languages, for Vietnamese, select German. For Hmong, select French. And then we're going to have those same messages from our interpreters as well. So maybe we could start with Maria Cervera. Oh, I think she might be having some sound issues. So let's go ahead and start with Juan.
Okay.
Tara, are they muted on our end, perhaps?
They're not.
I believe it's because they're in interpretation mode already.
Yeah, maybe they're busy interpreting. Okay, so let's just go ahead and move on. And so turning back to Superintendent Aguilar.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tara. I do want to make sure that in addition to thanking each of our board members for their participation, our board members will be asking questions that we have received from our community in several of the groupings: health and safety, for example, social emotional learning and well-being of our students, questions related to academic engagement for our students, how we're thinking of supporting our families as well. But I know that our board wanted to make sure that we did a lot of listening from our families as well as from our panelists. And so we want to make sure that we do more of the listening than the talking. And so we are going to continue turning it over to President Ryan to get this started.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Aguilar. I want to just begin by thanking all of our families, our hardworking staff, and our teachers throughout the district for meeting these extraordinary challenges head on. I don't think any of us could have anticipated a year ago that we would be discussing beginning the 2020 school year virtually. However, the unprecedented nature of this public health crisis has required us all to think differently, and frankly, has required the district to become very busy building a plane midair. I want to say, as a mother of a 8 and 10-year-old who attends Sac City schools, I have heard from so many parents struggling with the anxiety of wondering how they are going to tackle the monumental task of both continuing to work and helping to support their children's distance learning. I've also heard from so many staff that are angst-ridden over the prospect of being away from the students and the school community that they so dearly love. And I've heard from many teachers who have expressed that they just miss their students and want to ensure that we can give them the best quality learning experience in these very difficult times. So tonight we're going to talk about the distance learning plan and respond to many of your questions. I want to reiterate what Superintendent Aguilar said. We heard you, that you needed to have a dedicated forum to be able to talk about these issues in greater detail. And so rather than have our regularly scheduled board meeting, we chose to have a town hall where we will do a deep dive into distance learning and public health at a level that we just couldn't do in a traditional board format. I think, as evident by the hundreds of community members who are participating in today's town hall, there is a desperate need for these conversations as we grapple with what learning will look like in a new environment that none of us have been a part of before. I want to again thank you for your patience and encourage you to continue to submit your questions and dialogue with your school community and your board members who care deeply about ensuring that we're doing everything we can to meet the needs of your children, of our children, of the community at large. And with that, we are going to begin by hearing from Dr. Casserier. We are very fortunate this evening to have one of the region's top public health officials and someone who is intimately involved in the rapidly evolving decisions around Sacramento County's public health response.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. So I'm going to just real quickly give an overview because I know there are some questions and I'd like to leave time for those questions. Where are we at in Sacramento right now? We have over 12,000 total cases that have been reported. We're getting about 200 cases, new cases reported per day. As far as deaths, we have 174 and we're getting about 2 added every day, but that goes up and down. Specifically for children, in the age group 0 to 9, right now we have 440 reported cases. And among children 10 to 19, it's 942. So those have also been steadily going up. With hospitalizations, we're up to 265. It did go up to almost 280 at one point, but it seems like it's beginning to come down. So a few new things that have happened in the interim. One, I'm sure you've all heard about the problems that we've had with our database, the CalReady. There was a problem with the server, which set up a series of other problems that came up, ending with a lot of reports not coming through. And so the state worked very hard over the last week to get that fixed. But in the meantime, it kind of made it difficult for us to know exactly where we were heading in terms of our trend, as well as the the case count and also knowing where we were at on the monitoring list. Over the weekend, we were told that the problem was solved. So we're in the middle of trying to make sure that we get all of the new cases processed. We do know that at least from the data we have now, there still seems to be a downgoing trend with the number of cases. But as I mentioned, we're still getting about 200 per day. So what does that all mean in terms of school? So a few weeks ago, the state of California released the guidelines for school reopening and stated that counties that are on the monitoring list should have all schools start in distance learning. That is actually a decision that in Sacramento we had already come to. So that supported the decision that we had made. But in addition to that, the state also said that there is a waiver process, but that waiver process is dependent on the number of cases over a period of 2 weeks per 100,000 population, basically the case rate for the last 2 weeks. And so Sacramento had been hovering around 130 to 150 per 100,000. So the limit for the waiver was 200 per 100,000. And so we had been in discussion with SCOE about what our decision was going to be and how we were going to move through this, and also getting the guidelines that the state provided for how to implement the waiver. But because of the crash that we have had, and also because we still seem to be getting a lot of cases coming through on a daily basis, we are at this moment not accepting any waivers. We are going to be waiting to see what happens with the data over the next 2 weeks and then be able to make a decision. And I know that's very hard on a lot of people who've kind of been looking forward to being able to access the waiver process. But I think there are some concerns that we have had, and also seeing what has happened in some of the places that have opened schools and ended up having to close because a number of the children came up with being positive. So we want to make sure that when we do end up opening up, that we've done everything that we can and that everyone is at a reasonable comfort level in terms of our being able to provide a safe environment for both our children and for our staff. The last point is about the school sports and the conditioning. So we're still considering that. We got a little bit of different information from the state, so we wanted to know exactly what direction they were going in. And finally, when their guidance came out, they told us that the conditioning is not tied to being on the monitoring list. But again, I think we are still having a discussion about what do we consider safe enough for our children, because to be honest with you, we have had cases reported to us among coaches and among students involved in sport. So looking at what we need to do to make sure that we minimize the risk to all of our children, I think is important. And so we're hoping that within the next week that through our discussions, we'll be able to have a clearer idea and put out some guidance for all of you so that everyone knows what direction we're going in and what to expect over the coming weeks. But as Superintendent Aguilar mentioned, that right now the plan is that you would all start in distance learning, and I believe that that is what the school district is focusing on. So with that, I wanted to leave time for questions. So I don't know if there are any questions for me.
Superintendent Aguilar, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Kasiriye. We, in fact, did have many questions about health and safety, as you can imagine. We did want to have some of our students participate in the town hall, and we've asked Natalie Nielsen to ask one question that we received, which is top of mind for many of our community members, and I'll defer to her. We also have asked Victoria Flores, who's our Director of Student Support and Health Services, Nathaniel Brownie, who oversees our facilities, to participate should they want to add anything to the overall response. But at this point, let me ask Natalie to ask this question.
Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar. The question I received was, is it possible to conduct any classes in person at this time, including outdoors? And if not, what will be required in order to do so?
Thank you for that question. Yes, we have received a question about being able to have classes outdoors, and we have to develop guidelines for that if it is something that we feel is safe enough. So right now, I don't have a definitive answer on that, but it's one of the requests that we have received that is being considered at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Kasiriye. We've also asked, as I mentioned earlier, some of our board members will be asking questions. Again, there are questions that have come from our community members, either through listening sessions or through the opportunity to ask questions through our webpage. So I'm going to ask Member Morawski to ask a couple of the questions that we have received related to health and safety.
Thank you, Superintendent, and hello again, Dr. Kasiriye. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. So the question that we received was fairly blunt, so I'll just rephrase. It was, when will someone have the backbone to do what we need to do to control the virus so we can reopen our schools and do what's best for kids? So
Thank you
that's
so much.
that's
Thank
kind of
you
the
for that.
question. So
Yeah.
if I could just kind of put maybe a little more context on it, I think what they're getting at is that we are relying on the community and the county public health in order to reopen our schools. So I think what folks want to know is, what are we doing? What is the county doing to get us to that state? And what does that state look like?
Thank you for that question. So there are a couple of things that we're doing. One is, of course, as we continue to monitor, we're also looking at being able to expand our services for being able to do the testing, because one of the issues we've had is that there are people who have complained that it's very difficult for them to be able to get to a testing site or even get an appointment at a testing site. And even when they do, there are delays in getting the result. And we know that those are issues that will impact our ability to do contact tracing effectively. Because in order to do contact tracing, it's very important that we're able to get to everybody who is reported to us quickly enough so that we can implement the measures of isolation and immunization. Oops. I have to go and put my lights back.
Oh, that's okay, Dr. Kasiriye, go ahead. So as Dr. Kasiriye returns, I think, three themes that we heard that I think are pretty important to the public health considerations and the questions we've been receiving from board members and the public and families at large. 942 students or 0 to 17-year-olds have contracted COVID. There are no waivers being granted at this time, and they are still assessing the safety implications of sport and outdoor learning. Dr. Kasiriye.
So my apologies for that. There's an automatic switch here at a specific time, so I kind of got caught in the middle. But going back to what I was saying, some of the things that we're working on in order to be able to get to the point where we feel that it's safe enough for being able to open the schools is increasing the testing availability, including being able to offer testing for our school staff once school opens, because that is one of the criteria that was mentioned in the state guidelines that we need to be able to include. So we're working with SCOE to be able to do that. In addition, of course, contact tracing is important. And then I think there's a role for each and every one of us, which is what we've been harping at all along, is the measures that each of us can take. If you're sick, stay home, stay away from others. If you have to go out, wear a face covering. Hand washing is important, and social distancing. They might seem simplistic, but we know that those are public health measures that are effective. And so those are things that we can put in place along with waiting until the case count goes down, because now we know that with some of the businesses being closed, there's a reduction in the number of people moving around. It's also important, of course, to always remember the importance of not going in gatherings. So, because that's a place where there's a higher risk for transmission.
Thank you, Dr. Kasirier. I think we're hearing that we all as a community have to be part of the solution to stop the spread. And we're so grateful for your time and continued partnership with the school district. Superintendent Aguilar?
President Ryan, just before we transition on to another theme for today's town hall, I just wanted to say thank you again to Dr. Kasirier, with whom our team is in touch almost on a daily basis. This is the third meeting or session that she's participated in. She's been very generous with her time. I think I can say that very few of us would like to be public health officials at this time. So hang in there, Dr. Kasirier. Thank you for your support. We will be asking, I'm sure, in the near future, if you can come back and give us another update,
Sure.
because as you can hear in the questions, there is a lot of interest in trying to stay on top of those metrics and those conditions that you're monitoring, that we can help improve so that we can get back into providing in-person supports to our students and their families. So again, thank you, Dr. Kasirier.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for the invitation.
At this time, thank you again, Dr. Kasirier. We're so grateful for your work. At this time, we're going to have an opportunity to hear from Liz Guillen of Public Advocate. Many of you know Liz as a constant presence at our board meeting, but also as a fierce advocate for K-12 equity, access, and student success across the state of California. Liz?
All righty. Tara, are you going to do my slides?
And we have it up, actually. Yes.
You do?
Yes. Can you see the screen? We have the SB 98.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. I wasn't seeing it.
No, and thank you everyone for being patient with us with our technical difficulties. These are the new realities of trying to do big, ambitious town halls.
Right.
Via
All right. Well, this is just my intro slide. I'm happy to be here. And if anybody, I think I'm pretty easy to reach. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email's here as well as my phone number. And if you don't get it on this document, I'm sure you can connect with somebody and give it to you at the district. So on to the next slide, please. This slide summarizes how the legislature and the governor agreed to use federal funds to spare school districts from budget cuts, something that we feared would be the natural result of the pandemic and its impact on our health and our ability to conduct business as usual. So this was captured in legislation, Senate Bill 98, which is referred to as the Education Budget Trailer Bill. The learning continuity and attendance plan that we're talking about is a new requirement. This is a condition to receive this funding. We know we've not escaped the continuing impact of COVID, and we know that these amounts of funding are not adequate even in a good time. But the emergency schooling that we had last spring has to be made up to students, as well as what they are going to lose in education by school closures this year. The main point about this slide is that this plan and the process of developing it are part of the accountability that's conditioned on receiving these funds. Next. So the plan is required by law to include certain elements. And the next two slides list these elements, and I'm going to review them rather quickly. I was pleased to see in the district's learning plan that Senate Bill 98 references are throughout. So that was very helpful, I think. Even though we're opening in distance learning mode, the plan has to include what the plan is for when in-person learning is possible. And note the particulars. Whenever possible, particularly for students who have experienced significant learning loss because of school closures or are likely to experience learning loss because of future closures. I want to point that out as a priority, that when we do go back, even if it's in short supply or we have to prioritize, that our neediest students need to be first. On the second point, distance learning, I'm going to unpack that a little bit more later. On the learning loss mitigation, that mitigation that the district's plan has to address isn't just from last spring, but the learning loss that is bound to happen as we continue. We know that distance learning is not the best mode of learning for all students. And so we know that we're really going to have to be cognizant about how we measure it and whether or not the strategies the plan says that we're going to use to identify loss and address it, whether or not they are effective. So that's pretty important. The next slide includes, I missed the mental health and social emotional well-being point, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. So on the next slide, sorry, Tara, professional development. This is something that teachers and other adults will need to try and address all the new things that our students will need and some of what they'll need to be able to help them. Professional development is mentioned a lot in the law, and it relates to social emotional impacts that teachers will need to try and address, but it also relates to other elements. The student and family engagement and outreach mentioned here is about connecting with students and families for schooling. This is a big equity piece. There have to be specific plans for how the district is going to reach students and families who are absent. Those are hard to reach. What is the district's plan to connect them to school and keep them connected? The law is clear that the plan has to say how districts will do this in languages other than English. We know that bilingual teachers are in short supply in the district, so we can't rely just on teachers. We know the translation unit is not enough either. So we have to really understand what is the plan to reach out and reconnect students and their families. School nutrition is the last thing here. I think the district has done a good job of this. At least those were the reports I heard from last spring. In the next slide, please. For each of these 7 items, the plan has to show how the district is paying for them. Excuse me. So you will see, we should be seeing expenditure tables, excuse me. Also, the existing law in the local control funding formula is maintained, excuse me. Even though there was no LCAP required last June, the district has to continue to show in this new plan how the district is increasing or improving services using the supplemental and concentration funds for its students that generated them. That's low-income students, English learners, and students in foster care. And of course, last year's LCAP doesn't reflect the pandemic. So there will be some new needs that need to be identified and addressed. Your committees, your local control and accountability plan committee, the LCAP PAC, as well as the district's English Learner Advisory Committee, have the specific right under SB 98 to review the plan and to give comments to the superintendent and to get back comments from the superintendent. This is very similar to the LCAP process. The public also has this right to give comments, though we don't have it. District's plan does a good job of letting us know what these requirements are. I'm just going to cover 3 of them here because I think they speak most compellingly to the equity issue. So learning continuity, that's what the name of this plan is. Continuity of instruction is the first part of distance learning. And that's about getting a full curriculum of substantially similar quality regardless of delivery method. That means grade level standards, sequencing, progress, being measured. I was glad to see some reference of the district's curriculum guides on this. We know that expectations of students is a huge equity issue in our district. I've been to enough DLAC meetings to know that parents really understand this is a problem and they keep wanting to know how to fix it. So this will be something that will be important for all of us to look at closely. Let's look at number 4, students' participation and progress. So these are 2 different activities, measuring participation and measuring their progress. Both of these have to use live contacts and synchronous instructional minutes in their measurement. We know that real-time or synchronous instruction was not the norm for many students, especially English learners, students experiencing homelessness, and students in foster care, and students with disabilities. I was happy to see the district's instructional minutes go above and beyond the law, proposing 240 minutes or more for everyone for every day. SB 98, remember, just sets out the bare minimum. So we would expect more than that in our district. I also like the district's proposal to record and store synchronous lessons so that students can at least engage in live instruction asynchronously, in other words, what they miss. And it also lets students go back and review lessons, which I like. I know that the adults are going to have to agree on how to make this. I was happy to see that the district acknowledges the need for weekly engagement records. This should ensure that more contact for students is occurring than there was last spring. And this speaks to one of the things that the district will be audited on. Finally, the last thing on distance learning, the law lists these specific student groups on purpose. It calls them out as having unique needs, and we should expect the plan to lay out what different and additional things the adults will be doing to support these specific student groups. I was happy to see references to small group instruction, individual check-ins, designated English language development, and integrated student supports and social emotional check-ins. I think I would like to see it all in one place for these unique groups. I'm not sure what the plan is for getting the plan, in a format that makes that possible. Yes, the school closures were hard on everyone. But some more than others. But these student groups are among the most negatively affected, and they are a focus of the new law requiring this plan. So the next slide. There were a couple of things that the state's template for the school districts left out. They didn't have a lot of time to put the form together for all the districts to fill out. One of them was the English language development piece. So I was really happy to see that in the district's plan. And I was also, let's see, even though English language development is an existing requirement for English learners, it was specifically called out in SB 98. So that's why it's important, I think, to make sure it's in the plan. It would be good if our district's plan, I couldn't tell from the district plan whether or not the English language development was going to be synchronous or not. It did look like newcomers would get more, and so I was happy to see that. I've just got one more slide. This last slide is about social emotional well-being. It's definitely called out in SB 98, and I was glad to see that there are expectations in the district's plan for instruction that ensures that lessons are going to integrate social emotional learning, and that school leaders and teachers are going to incorporate culturally relevant content and social emotional supports. I'm pleased to read too that the professional development for teachers includes these things, and also restorative practices and anti-racist teaching. I know that the teachers union has been asking for this as well. So I think it's promising that to see this, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that's worked out. Now, I know I've gone through this very fast. The COVID-19 crisis really turned a glaring light on the existing inequities in our public schools. Again, the pandemic is hard for everyone, but it's having an unequal and more difficult impact on our most vulnerable students and their families. This plan is going to be so important in making sure, in giving us the impetus and the opportunity for planning collaboratively with all the stakeholders and being transparent in our communication about how the districts are going to pivot to meet the needs, the immense needs of our community. I want to put myself out there as a resource for other groups if they want to have more in-depth conversation or information about what should be expected in the plan, or how to evaluate the district's plan, and how to think about their own proposals to the district. And I'll stop now.
Thank you so much, Liz. And before we transition to our questions, I do want to let our speakers know that our wonderful translation services staff are struggling to keep up with the speed at which some of these questions and presentations are occurring. So if we can just slow down a bit to ensure that none of our families who are accessing these services are missing some of this really vital content. And as we go to our next question, I'm just going to do a quick recap as I did with Dr. Casirier. Thank you, Ms. Guillen, for speaking to the legal obligations of distance learning under SB 98. You talked about emergency schooling and the expectation that we as a district will mitigate learning loss and that districts across the state will do the same. You talked about the legal expectations of live contact. Talked about the legal expectations of synchronous instruction. You talked about the legal expectations for minimum instructional minutes. Again, the minimum instructional minutes that we would provide to students to ensure the quality of their learning. And you talked about the importance of engagement and the expectations around engagement, including keeping records of engagement and tracking the social emotional learning. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our student, Sarah Farah, who is going to ask our next question.
Hi, everyone. This question is going to be for Ms. Guillen and Ms. Beta. The question is there going to be any interaction between teachers and children during the instructional time? What does this interaction look like, and how are children going to be assessed?
Liz, would you like me to go ahead and start, and then you
Yes, I would.
join in?
That would allow me to make sure I understood what I read about what your proposal is.
Sure. I appreciate this question so much, Sarah. So first and foremost, aligned to exactly what Liz just shared, our synchronous instruction is live instruction where the student is learning with their peers. We know, and we've heard from our students and our families that we've missed that. We need that community learning experience where you get to see your teacher gets to interact with you, and you get to interact with your peers. So that gives you some thoughts about what that synchronous learning absolutely will look like. Regarding how will students be assessed, when you're in a synchronous space, Sarah, and your teacher's offering you an opportunity to show how you're mastering the learning right there in that moment, you can demonstrate for your teacher right there in that synchronous space what you're learning. One of the most important ways that we'll be tracking to make sure, and you heard Liz say that it's very important, not only do we put in a plan and provide students with this synchronous live instruction, but that we're monitoring to make sure that what we're doing and how we're doing it is meeting each and every student's needs. So also in our plan, the other piece of what will this instruction look like, we have targeted synchronous instruction. So if a teacher determines that a student has additional needs, whether those are English language development specified needs, content needs, or maybe a social emotional check-in, we've put into our plan targeted time for you to be able to interact and students to be able to interact with their teacher and maintain that support and connection. It's a great question. I don't know, Liz, what else you might add?
The only thing I love that. It makes me feel like I understand. I'm a good reader. I understood that. I would just add that I encourage people to understand what the minimum instructional minutes are. So, for example, for transitional kindergarten through and kindergarten, it's 180 minutes. And the idea, I think, for some parents of having their kindergartners in front of a screen for 180 minutes is not possible or fathomable, but that is not what's being required. So I think it's really important to understand what in-person, real-time, synchronous learning is, what the difference between recorded synchronous learning might be, the difference between recorded programs like that aren't really targeting perhaps your lesson, just to understand the differences is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. That was a wonderful explanation of some fairly heady material that I know so many of us parents are trying to grasp right now. With that, we are, do we have additional questions for Ms. Beta?
No,
Not
President.
at this time.
But I did want to make sure that as everyone heard from Christine Bieda, Christine serves as our Chief Academic Officer and is doing a magnificent job in that role. And I'd like her to just expand a little bit more. One of the questions that we've received in a variety of contexts is this idea of what parents should expect, or at least what we want our parents to expect as we open the school year with distance learning, because it is new for all of us. And so many of us as parents of students in the district are managing everything else that we have going on in our lives, and will hear and see our students engaged. And it's very critical that, at least as superintendent, that there is a common understanding of what our parents should expect as we begin the school year with distance learning. And then we do have additional questions that I would like to make sure that our students ask, but if we can start with that very general overarching theme, Ms. Bieda.
Sure. And I'll just start by thanking you, Ms. Guillen, for bringing so much clarity to SB 98. Hopefully, as you hear some of this description, you'll see some real clear linkage. Our work in distance learning is really to operationalize what you just shared with SB 98 and to operationalize that into a high quality distance learning experience for every single learner in Sacramento City Unified School District. And I just want to start by acknowledging that we know that our spring teaching was crisis teaching, and that we were distance doing, essentially assigning work and assigning projects without that needed instruction that we know our students need to be successful. So we also know that we have to address the much needed improvements and service to our students prior to this COVID-19 crisis. So we can't let this crisis go to waste. I know you've heard me say that before, and I'll keep saying that this is our chance for true systemic improvements and much needed change. So it is with this real long-term thinking in our short-term space that I hope we're only in for a short term, that we move into this work really to reduce the variation that our students experienced in the spring, as well as what we move as we move into the future. We planned our distance learning plan around unfinished learning research from the Council of Great City Schools. And our district proposal was really driven by this research and their 6 guiding principles. So I'd like to share those principles as well as how our plan, now that we've seen it and we're starting to really understand it, address those principles. The first 3 are a commitment to grade level content and instructional rigor, a focus on the depth of instruction as opposed to the pace, and then this 3rd principle about prioritizing content and learning. So in our plan, as Ms. Guillen just shared, and then also shared in SB 98, these are addressed with some incredible work that was achieved by our curriculum and instruction department with our training specialists. They have created a very comprehensive teacher support scope and sequence for both English language art and math. They embedded those social emotional lessons directly into each scope and sequence document. These links are easy to get to, easy to access, so our teachers can easily support our students. And they've also embedded links to support our English learners to ensure their access to every single lesson that's being taught. We also designed an assessment cycle. So we heard Ms. Guillen talk about we can provide the instruction, but how do we know that what we're doing is really working for our student? So we designed an assessment cycle that's completely aligned to the scope and sequence. It's also linked directly in the document. So we will know all along how our children are progressing. And this will enable us to make adjustments to our instructional programs really based on student needs. The 4th principle from the Council of Great City Schools calls out maintaining the inclusion of each and every learner. We heard Ms. Guillen talk about some of our most vulnerable students, and we know that that's a large percentage of the students who we serve in Sac City. This is addressed somewhat, you'll see in what we just heard above, but in addition, we are also planning for enhanced training for our teachers on the universal design for learning. This, as I've shared before, is a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for every single student based on scientific insights into how humans learn. We offered this training for our teachers in the spring, but now we're prepared to enhance this training to ensure that all of our learners have access to safe learning. To address the 5th principle, which states that we will identify and address gaps in learning through instruction, and that we will monitor students' progress on grade level appropriate assessment and adjust supports based on student results. We continue to propose that live synchronous instruction that you heard Liz speak to both in SB 98 and in our plan. We know the value of creating these learning communities where our students are learning together, as well as the value of the teacher being with the students to assess in the moment through very patient and informed instruction so they understand just what students need in that moment. We are also proposing synchronous targeted small group instruction as our teacher practitioners learn a student's academic needs, SEL needs, or even other just I need to connect needs. These live opportunities will give our students the opportunity to be able to have the connections, as well as our teachers to learn more about how their instruction is being mastered by our students so that we can help to move forward. And perhaps most importantly, some of those connections, as we were all getting on today, we were saying, hi, I miss you, and this is true for our kids. So this offers these opportunities for connections for our kids. The last principle reminds us just to continue to focus on our commonalities, the commonalities that students share in this time of crisis and not to just focus on the differences. So here's what I need our parents to expect from us, for our students to expect from us, from our community to expect from us. We've heard from you in our surveys and in all the community meetings that Superintendent Aguilar shared that we've participated in. And here's what we need you to know that we're planning to provide for you. Consistent, direct live instruction, symmetry and cohesion in learning and in delivery. We heard you say, I need to know what my Google Classroom landing platform is going to look like, and I need to know what will my week look like. We hear you. We're also needing you to expect collaboration between our teachers, between our administrators, between our special education support providers and our general education support providers to provide that cohesive learning experience for your student. Count on us for professional development. It is all through SB 98 and other supports for our educators. Appropriate supports and accountability for those students and who are receiving special education supports and services. You need to hold us accountable to make sure that that's happening for your student. Please hold us also accountable for targeted student support and intervention, targeted and integrated ELD for our English learners, assessments and accountability. And we heard you need more communication and you need feedback. And we know that as we return together, we are returning like we have never returned before. And although we are very sad that we won't be with our kids right now, please know that we are planning to be with our kids and that we are planning to be a better system for all of our kids when we do return in person. So I appreciate this time this evening to share some of our plan and to hear some questions and be able to address our other needs.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you, Ms. Vieta. President Ryan, we do have a couple more minutes, and I do know that there are a lot of questions aside from our commitment to health and safety. If we were returning back to our schools, of course, this topic is absolutely critical. The academic, the social and emotional well-being of our students. What is this going to look like in the world of distance learning? And I'm tracking as best I can. There's 124 questions that our community has been writing down. Almost 1,000 participants, and we're going to try our best to incorporate some of those. But at this time, we have some additional questions from Sarah as well as from Abby that they would like to ask Ms. Vieta.
All right, so the first question is coming from a parent who says that they work full time and that scheduling for them is a big issue. So their question is, what if my student misses classes or cannot attend Synchronous and they're not there to maintain and ensure that the student is on those classes?
That's such a great question. Our proposal, and Ms. Guillen shared this, calls out recorded opportunities from the live synchronous instruction so that if a student needs to view the instruction at another time, either just to get an extra scoop of that instruction, or if a parent and family has their needs met at a different time of day, they won't have to log in synchronously. They can count on that instruction and an equitable experience asynchronously. Thank you for that question. Great question.
And an additional question from Abby as well.
Thank you, Mr. Aguilar. A question that has been asked by a lot of students is that it seemed like the assignments we had received last year were harder after distance learning started. Is there a reason why?
That's another really great question. Abby, you heard me begin with that in the spring we were in crisis teaching and we were in a distance doing mode. We heard a lot of assignments being given, but those assignments being given without the appropriate and targeted instruction that every student deserves. So I do think those assignments certainly can be harder if you've just been assigned it and not provided the direct live instruction that you need and deserve to be able to be very successful, as well as assuring that the assignment and all of the instruction is designed around the universal design for learning. So with our fall work, our intention is direct live instruction with assurance that a teacher understands that a student is ready to do the work that they need to do independently when they move to that asynchronous work that you do on your own. It's a really great question.
Thank you, Ms. Bieda. President Ryan, we would like to incorporate some additional questions.
Yes.
And so we've asked that we continue to follow on this theme, but beyond academics, of course, the importance of the whole child and the social and emotional well-being of our students. And so I'd like to make sure that we have some time to discuss that as well.
Yes, and Superintendent Aguilar, as we transition to those questions that we'll be fielding from our community and will be read by our board members, just want to also, for those who are just joining us now in real time, recap a few of what were key highlights out of Ms. Bieda's presentation. So she has shared that the Distance Return Together plan includes enhanced teacher training, building upon what was done in the spring. It includes best practices for learners with additional targeted student support, including for our special education community. It includes live instruction. It includes the ability to monitor student progress and adjust to meet the academic needs of those students in real time. It includes synchronous instruction, and this is something we heard over and over again from parents, not just in large groups, but small group synchronous targeted instruction to foster connection and deeper learning and understanding of the core content.
Thank you, President Ryan. If we could also just shift a little bit over to, again, beyond the academic well-being of our students. Of course, we need to pay attention to the whole child and the overall well-being of our students. And I've asked board member Michael Minnick to select some questions related to that topic as well.
Great, thank you. And I've kind of synthesized a couple of the questions here. We know that students often rely on teachers and staff at school for emotional support. And so with distance learning, how will we ensure that our students have a safe place or a safe person that they trust or be able to confide in if they have issues going on at home? And then related to that, how will we be focusing on trauma-informed, healing-centered practices in our social emotional learning?
So I'll take that question. My name is Mycelia. I'm the Director for Social Emotional Learning for the district. And I appreciate this question. The shift from trauma informed to healing center is really critical because I think that we are more than the trauma or the experiences that we have with trauma. So that's really important. I think that we will need to prioritize this year adult SEL because the way that our adults show up to create learning conditions for our students will be really critical. So their own self-care will be really important. So we'll be providing some supports and resources for our adults to also take care of themselves. As we all know, a person who is dysregulated tends to be more reactionary. And so we want to make sure that our adults have what they need to be steady and to be regulated and to fully support their students to feel safe socially and emotionally. We will also be ensuring that we're focusing on the 3 R's in terms of healing centered. So routines, relationships, resilience. And so when I say routines, I think folks have spoken to this, but what are those rhythms, those daily rhythm, welcoming rituals and routines that are predictable, that are warm, that are caring, that lets our students know that they belong in that classroom space, physically or virtually. In terms of relationships, that has to be a priority in the way that we connect with our students, in the way that they feel cared for, that they are valued and that they are embraced and that they are a part of the community. And then lastly, resilience. What are those things that we need to ensure that our students continue to feel a sense of resilience. So what are the healing practices? So we'll be supporting our educators with brain breaks and mindfulness practices, what we call mindfully breathe, move, rest strategies that are going to be really critical for our students to stay engaged and to sustain their sense of hope and resilience.
Thank you. Thank you, Maisie. I've also asked, because there's a lot of concern that we've heard from Member Bang, a question related to supports for our parents, specifically related to technical support and other supports. So if Member Bang could ask a question based on some of the listening sessions that she's organized and participated in, and has also heard from our community.
Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Can I just say a few words in Hmong before I ask my question, if that's okay? So nhớ rằng ít trong nhật sĩ cái tin cha phong như sẽ là cú luôn bây giờ máy và cú hiện nay từ school board member cú trong xe hàng thì mà nó nên sẽ là tổ công bây thia lúc học phía mà nó giờ ít lúc trong sala có nó đợi bên nhà thiết bị tí sẽ là sẽ là mua lúc nông thì cha trở đi này bỏ thiên này bao bị cú hình giá bao sẽ tại vì nó cho tới mình chú sĩ nhớ hậu chế vì tia mua khó cả mua COVID-19 bâyตัวลูกหอบเพี้ยนเนาะซ้ำลงเจอในเจ้าเป็นเนี่ยที่ไปจีก็แต่ชินอไปโยอลิจาอีลูก school district เราป้าเธอไปจตู้มีหยวนโอเคกูสหายเราในทุเรศตัวให้เตียยลีในมอลูนุ่งจอนจงทอกันในชะดาก็ฮูกูนะโอเคฮูกูกูสตงกูใครเราในชะดาป้าแต่ชินอกูสตงยาเปล่าอีจีเจ้าอีส่วนเปล่าอี again กูสตงยาเปล่าอีจีเจ้าอีส่วนเปล่าอียาจงเตียยก็มัวลูนุ่งมัวเตมิงชุชิอาจีวิเตีย distant learning ละทอกันในฮูกูนะโอเควิเตียรู้จงชะลาแต่ชินอไปให้รู้อังกฤษเลยกูสาhai cho lưu mong nó còn nay tu nó hiện tu nó nay tu ít tu sai mong nó nhon nó ba thơ bây giờ na okay. So Superintendent, the question that was submitted regarding Wi-Fi, and I think actually this one was regarding devices. What do families do if their devices are not working? How do they request any hotspots for each child in the home? And if their internet speed is too slow or non-existent, where can they go for technical support?
Thank you very much, Member Bang. And of course, thank you for your efforts, President Ryan's, other board members who have been on top of this issue from very early on in the spring, and the partnerships that we created with the city of Sacramento, with Comcast. We actually did account when we purchased Chromebooks, did account for some of the Chromebooks not to be functioning. As you know, we also utilized Chromebooks that our system had in place, our schools already had. Some of those might be older units. So at this point, to our community, we do have what we believe are plenty of Chromebooks available for any student that needs a Chromebook. And that doesn't just mean one per family, but one per student that needs a Chromebook. Because as we enter full distance learning, if you have 2 or 3 or 4 children at home, all of them might be engaged with their teachers at any given time. At this time, you should access your principal, your own school site. Our principals are now back, and we do plan to make sure that we follow up with our families on this topic. In addition, we do have and did plan for making sure that we had internet access for our families initially for the first 6 months of service. We have begun some initial conversations to see if we can extend internet access for our families beyond the 6 months. Those would be issued to families that qualify and meet certain criteria, income-wise, for example, and that also can be accessed through our school sites. If you already have a Chromebook and it's not working, the charger, please return it to us and we will issue a new Chromebook. For our Sac City Kids Connect program, we do know that there might be families that live in a household that is not serviced by Comcast or Xfinity, please do reach out to us. We have some hotspots that are available, even though they're not ideal. We also are continuing to work with the city through a partnership where we might have Wi-Fi in some RT buses. But we are going to do everything we can to be as creative as possible so that internet access, Chromebook availability is not a factor in our students being able to access curriculum and instruction, of course, from their teachers. And finally, Member Vang, to your question about where can they go for technical support, just know that we will be laying out a plan so that our families know where to contact, who to contact. I heard directly from families, some parents who knew that their children had to upload assignments, for example, to Google Classroom, and they themselves didn't know how to help their younger children who also didn't know how to upload assignments. So that is something that we're very aware of. We do have a small but mighty team in our FACE department, our family and community engagement department, that is trying to figure out how to plan for that need that our families have. And we've also, through some of our board members, Board Member Morawski and others, are working with CBOs who also might be able to fill some of that void.
Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar. I just want to do a time check. We're at 6:49. So we have about 11 minutes left since we started a bit late. And thank you for your very detailed answer. This is a critical question.
Thank you, President Ryan. A lot of the questions that we have been receiving have been very specific to some of our student populations. As you heard from Ms. Guillen, SB 98 talks about our most vulnerable populations that account for some of our LCFF funding. And I've asked Member Garcia to ask a question related to some of our most vulnerable populations in Sac City Unified, please.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Liz, for underscoring the SB 98's call out for these very specific student populations. Our district is primarily a district that has a high level of low income students, about 70%. And then we have also 20% of our students who are English learners. So that's who we are as a district. But the specific question is, what are we doing as a district that will ensure that our most vulnerable students, our English learners, foster youth, our students experiencing homelessness, and LGBTQ+ are being supported in a distance learning environment?
I'd love to share a little bit, and then we have some deeper expertise here also. I think first and foremost, assuring that through a tiered system, we are engaged with kids that are difficult to find. As we knew in the spring, we started with about 1,600 students we were calling unreachable. Almost all of these students are in this group that you're asking about, Member Garcia, and I'm grateful for the question. And we really designed a beautiful tiered system of support to be down to, we're around 100 students because we did not stop during this summer time, continuing to try to find these students, put Chromebooks in their hands, connectivity in their hands. And so we really designed some good tiered supports that we knew helped our students to be able to find them, because that's first and foremost. If we're going to support the students, we need to know where they're at so that we can stay in touch with them. And then you heard in our academic plan, the plans for engagement, assessment, connection, targeted supports. All of those pieces will help to continue to help us to know how our students are moving and learning, and keep us connected so that if we know that they need additional support, or if we know families need additional supports, we've got those connections with the school so that we can get those supports to the families. And I know that Victoria Flores is here, and she would be able to offer some additional expertise to this question. Victoria, are you with us?
Yes. Good evening. Yes, one of the things I'll just reinforce reinforce is that, everything we learned in using our early warning system before this pandemic hit really played out and we found to be very true. So those students that were at risk before continued to, be at risk and we really worked hard to re-engage those students. So we have that system. We're going to utilize that system again. We're really grateful that was one of those strategies we were already employing. And so we do have, staff who are trained, to work with our families and our youth to re-engage. We've got foster youth staff and homeless services staff, and all of our, but honestly, it's everyone in the school system who really has to build that relationship and connect and then reach out when we need support. And we are definitely ready to continue that work.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Victoria and Ms. Bieda. Just want to underscore that, of course, we know that the rights of our students, the educational rights of our parents as well, didn't go away because we closed our schools. They continue, and we are here to serve you through the services that we do offer, albeit remotely. But we have a wonderful team of social workers, nurses, counselors, and so many other experts that we know our students rely on, especially as we continue to learn about the effects of this pandemic on our students' lives and our families' lives as well. And in that vein, I asked Member Pritchett as well to take a few questions again back on this topic of social emotional well-being and support services for our students. And I do want to just remind our community that there are a lot of questions related to students with disabilities. We are going to get to that topic next as well.
Okay, this questions from the community is a three-part question. What is the self-referral process for students and or families seeking social emotional support? What are the resources and services that are available to students and families? And what is the referral process that has been communicated to teachers and staff to support the students and families, especially since most of our school sites do not have a student support center?
Yeah, hi there. So this is Victoria Flores again with Student Support and Health Services. I'd be happy to answer this one. So, we worked really hard to make sure that we were just as accessible as we were when we were in physical space. And so all of our referral processes are on our website. All of our district cell phone numbers and email addresses for every single one of our staff, including our school nurses, is publicly posted. And then we also developed a wellness warm line. So a single phone number, because we realized it might be hard to navigate all these places to get information. And so that phone number is 643-2333. And you can call that number and get connected to anyone in our department. We really heard from our students that they weren't sure where to go or how to get help. And so we really wanted to make sure our students had access to information as well. So we're really working hard to push that information out to our students through our SEL surveys, letting them know we care about them, that we've got, phone numbers and crisis numbers that they can access. We also really leveraged our virtual calming room. We hope everyone's enjoying that. There's a space in there, though, that if you need support now, you can reach out for 24/7 support, and then also district resources. So we really want to reinforce that there's no wrong door. You can come in any way, and we've got you. We're here for you, and we are willing to kind of walk beside you. We're all working on our own wellness, and we really want our families and our students to know that we're here to listen and we're here to support.
Thank you, Victoria. And our final question is from Board Member Daryl Wu.
Thank you. We received many questions related to special ed, but here is an overarching theme. What support do parents have for children with an IEP?
Thank you, Member Wu. That is a great question that we've heard from so many parents. I think first and foremost, all of our students Even if they're students who are receiving special education supports, they're general education students first and foremost. So every support that we see in our plan and throughout SB 98, so everything that we've heard this evening, we need our parents to know that those are the expectations that you need to hold us to. Even if your student is a student who's receiving special education support, first and foremost, our students are general education students first. The second thing that I do want our parents to know is that our IEP, all of the work that we do for students, our IEP driven process is still in place. And what we know that as we're transitioning from our building instruction and support to our virtual instruction and supports, everything that's IEP driven, including any changes that are needed to an IEP, need to happen through that process. So we need our parents to know that all of those teachers and support providers that they have access to during our physical learning time, they still have access to those providers. Parents will see as we move into this new distance learning in our fall, they'll see additional accountability, including that the service delivery that our providers will be providing their students, because that's some of what we heard, that our parents didn't know what was happening or if they knew that something wasn't happening. But we have in our plan now that service logs will be kept so that we'll be accountable for the services that their students will be receiving, and that parents will have communication with all of those support providers. You also heard in our plan this collaboration between general education and special education, which is another area that we know we need to provide for support for parents. We're also working on with Superintendent mentioned our, we have a very small but mighty family and community empowerment department. They're working with our curriculum and instruction department on enriching our resources that we have online for all parents, as well as building supports for parents that will be offered just like we do for our students, synchronously as well as asynchronously. But this is an area of deep need for us and concern as a district, wanting to make sure that we're better caring for our parents as well as our students, our 7,000 students who are receiving special education support. I'm grateful for that question, Member Wu.
Thank you so much, Member Wu and Ms. Bieda. I do want to say that today is Board Member Daryl Wu's birthday, and so thank you for celebrating your birthday with us, with hundreds of community members, and with students at the center of how you choose to spend your time and energy.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
So we are right at 7 o'clock. We are going to end this evening by taking a final question from the audience. We'll be hearing from one of our wonderful student ambassadors, Dominique Brooks. Dominique, are you still with us? Oh, it looks like we have lost Dominique. So our final question is, how can families get more information about the Return Together plan and the next steps in the process?
Thank you, President Ryan. I'll just be very brief. We are very excited and have invested a lot of time and always welcome feedback. On our website, you will find all of the elements related to our Return Together, Return to Learn plan. It is in most of the languages that our families speak as well. It has very detailed information. So I welcome and would encourage our community members to access that again on our website. It is pretty prominent on our website. So I hope that people will access that. I also just want to clarify that that return to plan and all of the content and even our responses to questions from the public today are reflected in our proposal to our labor partners. It is important to note that we are in the process of still negotiating with our labor partners. So that is also another reason why I would encourage our community members to continue to access our website for updates. We do have a negotiations dashboard, for example, and I'm hoping that very soon we will be able to announce an agreement with all of our labor partners. Again, I want to just thank everyone for spending their evening with us. I'm just really deeply inspired that there were over 900 of you between the actual webinar participating as well as the live streaming that you could also access. We have 161 questions that were typed into the Zoom during the webinar. So President Ryan and board members, we probably will have to come together and think about how to continue these town halls as we continue to plan for the reopening of our school year on September 3rd.
Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar. And in closing out, I do just want to acknowledge how overwhelming the volume of the information we shared tonight might be for parents. I know that even as someone who lives with this, it is a lot of information. And so many of us board members are hosting smaller virtual convenings throughout the Sacramento City Unified School District to hear directly from parents and community as we try to be as responsive as we can to this very challenging situation. I want to thank those of you who've already participated in some of the virtual convenings and encourage you to participate in an upcoming session if you have additional questions and would like a more informal dialogue. And I also, at the urging of Board Member Pritchett, want to encourage all of our community members and parents who have been part of this evening's town hall to reach out to your board member individually with questions or concerns. All of our email addresses are on our website at www.scusd.edu. And then I just want to finally say, thank you again to our incredible staff, our teachers, our families, for being a part of developing a solution to a challenge that none of us could have anticipated. I believe that we are strong as a Sacramento City community, and I think the spirit of cooperation, collaboration, and sense that we can and must do better by our students is evident in each and every one of you. And I really want to call upon what Victoria Flores said tonight, and I hope that you'll take this to heart. We're focusing so much on the academic and emotional needs of our children, but as family members, whether we're a parent, caregiver, an auntie, a grandma, we're also struggling with the trauma and inequities that COVID has unmasked. And so, as Victoria said, we must also take care of ourselves and one another as we're striving to do everything we can to meet the needs of our children with urgency. I want to also recognize that our school community lost a giant in the field this year. Actually, yesterday, Frank Withrow, who was a 30-year teacher and administrator in Sacramento City Unified, both at McClatchy High School and at Sac High, passed away. We want to give our condolences to Frank's family and thank them for sharing him with us and for giving a lifetime of service in the classroom and to our schools and students. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.